My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Now podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Good morning, and welcome to The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs. In this episode, we're going to be talking about, should I use a contract? And the short answer is yes. If there's money involved, you should absolutely be using a contract. That's ultimately, you're just trying to protect yourself, protect whoever you're performing for, or maybe you're booking the show. Especially if you're booking talent. I mean, a lot of independent bookers don't use contracts. I mean, honestly, I book a lot of independent stuff, and I book on good faith that the comedians that I book will show up to the show and they will do what they're supposed to, and tell their jokes, whether it be clean material or blue material, whatever the show is. I typically do the good faith booking, but it's better to have a contract. And I mean, for comedy, you can use just a regular general contract that you can find online. They're pretty easy. I'm going to share my screen right now and just show a contract that I downloaded specifically for comedy. I just did that this morning. This is the first time I'm doing anything with the share screen, so if this doesn't come through, I do apologize. But we're gonna see what happens here. Okay, so this is just a comedian service contract that I just found by Googling. I did not write this contract. It is not mine. I don't know if there's copyright attached to it or anything, but you can find online, typically you can find free templates for contracts to do general contracts, or inexpensive, can't even talk, inexpensive, there we go, services to write up a contract or buy a template for Word. Or if you're handy with Word, you can just build your own contract. But it's pretty basic, It's just doing the contract between you and whoever you're working for, or vice versa. I mean, the purpose of the contract is, it's a tool for constructing a relationship between two parties, and it basically lays out each party's getting out of it, what they're promising to each other. It's basically a way to record that and to protect everybody involved in the transaction, because really we don't think about this a lot in comedy. We think, oh, I'm getting booked, I'm going to go do my show and I'm going to make people laugh. That's my job. That's all there is to it. That's what it is. But comedy is a business, and with business, there are business transactions. Even when you're on stage, when you tell a joke, then the transaction is you tell a joke, the audience laughs in response. That's a transaction in comedy. Then there's a transaction of, money being handled. When you are done performing, the booker or club or producer or whoever it is gives you the money, or the customer, the client, if you're doing corporate gigs. And who that is. So, like I said, this is just a general contract that you can, like I said, I found this online. It just basically breaks it down between you and the venue, or if you're booking comedians, vice versa, just says, where you're performing, the date, the time, length of performance, the amount of pay. You want to make sure that you have that all hashed out before you do a performance. And I really think, too, with that, if you're doing corporate stuff, a lot of times, in corporate comedy and working with private clients and stuff, you do a deposit. So like on here, I would even have, the length of performance, the amount of the full show, and then the amount of the deposit, and then whether or not, whatever there are for whatever your terms of service are regarding your deposit, whether it's non-refundable or it's refundable with X amount of days before the show, so on and so forth. And then, it has the contact person. So that would be whoever you're supposed to contact when you come to the venue. Anything else, then you can go further and, add a bunch of different information here. Like I said, this is just a general contract that I downloaded. I didn't really look too close into what, this verbiage is, but like I said, there's a bunch of them out there, but you want to make sure that, because you see this too a lot, people will go get a template, a contract, which is fine, and then they'll fill it out and use it, but they don't change it to really to for them specifically. Like, if you don't read this, it might have some terminology in there that's not related to what you're doing, and then the customer or your client's going to be confused by this contract, and they're going to probably send it back and be like, well, what does this mean? I'm not going to sign this. And then of course you have the signature lines. And on this too, I mean, if you really want to get technical with this, because they say contracts are law binding. Now, I'm not giving legal advice. I am not an attorney. I don't have a background in law. Like I said, whether or not this is, would hold up in court if something went bad and you had to, try to sue to get money or whatever it may be, I can't say that because I'm not a professional attorney. So I just want to throw that disclaimer out there for you guys today. But with this contract, another thing you could do, depending, if it's like a private client, if you're local, and you can meet them in person, you could even have a witness sign it, or, you can do, there's document services online that you can use to basically, certify the signatures. So it's an electronic signature, but it's done through a signature application. And a lot of companies that I've worked with that have required me to use contracts, comedy clubs and different tapings. And even recently, when the Art of Bombing, we signed up with a label now. And when we did that, the contract, they used a service online for all the paperwork. So there's that too. I don't know how much those services cost, but they are available. Come back here. So now that that's done, now, like I said, I don't know what the cost of those services are exactly. I think there's one is like Hub Sign or something. I don't even know the names. I should have looked at that. I forgot completely about that. But if you Google document signature websites and things like that, you can easily find that information. Now, when you start looking at a contract, like I said, you can have your terms of service in there and what everybody's agreeing to. There's some other things to think about too with the contract, and that is your proximity clause, aka radius clause. A lot of people don't know what that is. Basically, what that is, it's used more in entertainment, I think, than anything. And it was really used in music, but sometimes it is used in comedy. And what that is it is a clause that you'll have in a contract that says, if you're doing a show on this date, say today, January 23rd in St. Paul, Minnesota, then you can't perform. Maybe it's 45 days, maybe it's 90 days before and after your date of performance. And then it'll give a radius of mileage. So it might be within 200 miles. So then, now if I sign that contract, what that means is I can't do any other shows within the 45 before and after within 200 miles of St. Paul. And what that does is that's protecting the venue or the promoter or the booker, especially in smaller markets, because you'll see that happen where, a comedian usually, and if you look at a lot of your major comedy clubs in your area, a lot of times the headliners that they have come through only come through once a year. They may hit your town, in other venues because they might not have proximity clauses or whatever. But if a comic comes back to the same market too much, people are going to not go to that show. So it's a way to help protect them from performing earlier and maybe doing a free show. I've seen that where somebody was booked at a comedy club and they should be promoting those shows at the comedy club. But then in addition to that, they did some shows before their show at the comedy club, and they did it free, and they were promoting them as well. And what that does then is, why would people come see that comic if they can go see him for free before they're at the comedy club? So it's just not good business, really, for the venue or for you, because it makes, as a comic, I realize we're all trying to get paid, but it's kind of unethical to do something like that. And that's where the proximity clauses come in, because it protects from that. I actually have, I produced a show with Gallagher some years ago in San Diego with my partner at the time, Brandon Young, and we still have a proximity clause because it was a lifetime proximity clause with a comic for San Diego, because they were doing a retirement tour, and part of the contract that was that they weren't going to be, that they couldn't perform again because they were retiring. That's what we were advertising. That's what we were selling. That's what, all the marketing about the tour was. I'm retiring. This is my last show in this town, blah, 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 blah. And so that was put in the contract as a proximity clause that they couldn't perform in that area again. Now, if they actually performed in that area, would we take them to court? Probably not. It's probably not worth it, but that was just kind of a little tidbit to throw out there, that we have used that. So, and I've seen comedy clubs use proximity clauses a lot too, especially in cities where there's multiple comedy clubs, because that happens a lot too, where, you might get booked at Club A, and then 6 months down the road, Club C books you, or suddenly there's a fallout at Club C and they book that comic before they're supposed to be at Club A. And, and then that, like I said, it lowers sales for Club A when that comic then goes to that venue. So that clause is a lot of times, and it's more so if you're booking shows and producing your own shows, depending on your market and how much other competition you have, not really going to be that useful, I don't think. Like I said, it's more for bigger markets and bigger clubs and things like that, and bigger named acts that are bigger draws too. That's the other thing. A lot of times when a big comedian will be doing tours at theaters, that's why you won't see, even though there could be a decent sized theater within a couple hours, a lot of times they have to be 3 to 5 hours from people. So, because I always wondered this myself. Now, if you listen to the podcast, you're probably aware that I'm, originally from South Dakota, very tied in with the comedy scene there. And one of the things that I always wondered about, and that I learned that because of the proximity clauses, is that a lot of times a big time comedian would go to Sioux City, Iowa, even though Sioux Falls, which is bigger than Sioux City, is just an hour up the road. And I always wondered about that, because then what they would do, a lot of times their tour, if they were touring through the Midwest, they would go to Sioux City and then they'd go to Fargo and skip Sioux Falls. And I always thought that was funny. Well, it's probably because of a proximity clause that they don't want to do shows so close together, because now, even though they didn't come to Sioux Falls, Sioux City's still close enough that it'll probably draw people, bigger fans of that particular comic will probably drive from Sioux Falls to Sioux City to see that show. Or they might even take the trip and go to Fargo, even though it's a little further. But that's a lot of times why you'll see a proximity clause. Like I said, I don't know how useful it is. It's definitely not really that useful in corporate comedy, I don't think, because you're not really competing. Most corporate shows are built-in audiences, because whether it's a holiday party or a corporate event, they already have people there. They're bringing in entertainment in addition to whatever else they've got going on. So it really isn't that useful. Another thing that you may use in a contract when you're doing your contract, and this may be more for when you get a little bigger though, is the contract rider. And what that are, that's a list of things that need to be taken care of, whether it's a technical rider or not. There's comics, Gallagher, for an example, he has a technical rider that comes along with a lot of his shows, because he does a lot of the smashing and things like that. and it requires a lot of tech. You're supposed to have stage hands. There's got to have the table for smashing has to be a certain way, so on and so forth. So you've got technical riders, then you got general riders, and a lot of times people put these riders in. This is kind of a common fact, or maybe it's not. I've heard it a lot because I've been in the business a lot, but that people will use a rider just to see if the people they give the contract to are actually reading the contract. It's more of a test. So they'll do something funny in there, like they'll say, "I want a whole bowl of M&Ms, but I want all the yellow ones taken out," or something silly like that, or "I want a room full of boas in my feather boas in my dressing room," or whatever it could be. But it's more just to see if people are actually reading that contract, which it is kind of a funny thing to do. But with that, but if there's any like technical things or special things, if there are comics that have they have disabilities, and they'll have special needs. So a comic in a wheelchair, in their rider, it might say that they need to be able to have a ramp to get on stage. Things like that, little things that are important to the performance. When it comes to corporate shows, that rider might include technical things too, like sound, lighting, stage, all kinds of different things that you can have in there. Because without those things, if you've been doing comedy long enough, that it takes certain elements to do comedy, and to do comedy well. And without those things, it's just not going to be good. So sometimes the rider is just that. I need this sound system, I need to make sure I have a mic. And it could be even detailed because a lot of times at corporate events, they hold them at hotels, and they use wireless microphones, and a lot of times those wireless microphones don't work very well. So it may be, I need a wired mic, I need a mic stand, so on and so forth. So that's kind of all the stuff you're going to put in a contract rider. And it can be whatever you need. It's all kind of based on what the comic wants and how big you are. There's bigger comics that probably want certain things, certain specific things in their dressing rooms. It might be a particular brand of soda, or maybe a particular alcohol, or particular food, or whatever it may be. That's where they're going to find that. So that pretty much concludes what I was going to talk about. This is a quick episode just to kind of go over contracts a little bit. I'm going to go ahead. I see there's a few people watching, and thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to hold for just a couple minutes and see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I am going to wrap this up because I have another seminar that I'm giving today that I need to get ready for. So I'm going to be doing a seminar on electronic press kits. So if you'd like to check that out, just hit me up. Send me a message, and I can get you the Zoom details. That's at 11 a.m. today. So, all right. It does not look like I'm getting any questions. I know this is earlier than I usually do these on Saturday, but that's because I've got a pretty busy day. Oh, wait. Now I got a question. Okay. I want a room of Dan Bublitz Jr. Bodair photos in my rider. You are probably the only one that wants that. Even I don't want those in my my dressing room. That'd be scary. That's my good friend Brian. For those of you watching and listening, he actually owns a independent comic book publishing company, Empire Comic Press. You should go check it out. They got some good stuff coming up on there. Give him a little plug because he's very supportive. All right. I think that's going to do it for this morning. Thank you for those that have tuned in. And if you're not tuned in, that's okay. You can also listen to this. It'll be released on the Art of Bombing podcast, RSS feed. I can't even talk this morning. This is too early for me. I haven't had enough coffee for this stuff. I'm over here trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I just haven't had the coffee to pull it off completely. But either way, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Go visit the website, artofbombingpod.com. You can subscribe to the podcast there and follow us on all our social media platforms. We are Art of Bombing Pod. Thank you for tuning in and have a great rest of your Saturday and keep getting better.